Cool. Oh, cool. Cool. Looks like it's working. um, Sorry about that, everyone. Hello. Had a little bit of a hiccup technically. This is kind of my first go at doing this. Um, in case you don't know who I am Jesse Lumery, and I am a mentor here at Code Academy. And what I'm here to talk to you about is, oh no, and I spelled here wrong. That's horrible. That does not inspire confidence. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about HTML and understanding what markup is and kind of walking through what you learned in your first week at Codecademy. From a high-level overview, I want to talk about HTML generally and markup and Markdown, how to analyze a website using Chrome DevTools, talk a little bit about HTTP statuses. Right around there, that's going to be our halfway point, and I'm going to try to take some questions. After that, we're going to go into like a little live demo of building a website. Very simple website, going to be about space and planets and things like that. Then after that, I'm going to take some more questions. A little bit about me. I'm a software developer at Trunk Club, where I work on both the front and the back end. I do a lot of Ruby on the back end and a lot of JavaScript and React on the front end. I'm going to real quick just make sure everything's going as expected. Cool. It looks like there's a delay, and that's to be expected. Essentially what happens, there's like a 20-second buffer, or 10-second buffer. So if you guys, or if you folks say something, type something, I won't see it right away. It'll take me a second to see it. All right, now that all of the introductions are here, let's talk about HTML. So what is HTML? The definition, or kind of like what it stands for, is Hypertext Markup Language. And what that means, hypertext just means something more than text. It's not just what's written on a page. It's actually kind of describing how it's being written. And that's where the markup part comes in. A markup language is a language that sort of annotates and kind of makes things syntactically different than what is the actual text, but it does so in a way that allows you to display something more. Like, for example, italicizing text. The word might just say document, but to italicize it, you'd have to add some sort of markup. And HTML isn't kind of the only markup language. There are other markup languages. One such markup language is XML, or Extensible Markup Language. If you've ever seen XML, you can kind of see here, it looks pretty similar to HTML. It has a similar like tagging system. It imports files to style it, such as here we have the XML book style to kind of style my book XML. And it kind of tells you about the text of the document. It gives you some context and some semantics to it. So here it seems to be describing something like a Harry Potter book, and it has the author there as well as the title, and you kind of glean that from looking at it. Cool. Another markup language which is kind of popular is Markdown. And what's kind of interesting about Markdown is that it's used to transform regular text into HTML, whereas HTML is kind of used to be transformed into a web page. This is kind of a step before it. A lot of people take notes in Markdown because it's a little bit more legible and easy to write than something like HTML directly. And so a lot of times if you're writing up a simple post or kind of like some notes that you want to eventually display nicely, Markdown is a good option. So here you can see, instead of using something like a H1 tag, you just use a simple like a octothorpe or a pound sign, and that's used to then render a "this is my title" in H1 tags as opposed to just plain text. And similarly here, coolest is emphasized and Markdown is boldened. So those are kind of the reason why I bring up these ideas of Markdown and XML is to understand that HTML is part of a subset of languages. It's not the only markup language. It's one of many, but it is the one that's used for the web. And so that brings me kind of to my next point. What does HTML have to do with websites? And so for this, I'm going to do a quick little example and go to a website called DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is very similar to Google. It's a search engine. And the reason why I'm using this instead of Google is because it's a lot simpler underneath the hood than Google is. Not that it's terribly simple, but it's a little bit simpler. So what I want to talk about is what happens when I type in DuckDuckGo and hit enter. Your browser and your computer send a request to DuckDuckGo's servers. And DuckDuckGo servers then send back an HTML document, so just that HTML text. And kind of a way to visualize that is by opening the Chrome DevTools. So on my computer, I have it as Option Command I, Option Command I, and that'll open and close those DevTools. And what you can do is look on the Network tab to see, all right, when I hit enter on DuckDuckGo, you can look at kind of all the different stuff that's being sent back and forth. There's a lot. But if you look at the documents, there's actually only one. In this case, it's a web page. It's a little bit complex, but you can kind of see how it relates. It has, you can see here, it says like about DuckDuckGo, what else is here? Yeah, the search engine that doesn't track you. That's part of like what's displayed sometimes, but it's kind of this code here is what's translated into the code you see on the left, and we'll get back to that a little bit later. But that's just kind of like a preview of understanding like how HTML is used from the browser or from HTML to the browser and then to your eyes. Cool. And so part of that process is kind of the browser needs to understand the HTML in a way that it's able to display it to you. And so what happens is the HTML is transformed into something called the Document Object Model, or DOM tree. And it does this in a way that it's kind of intuitive, but it might not be. And so you have this HTML big element that has these children, head and body, and that's displayed here, head and body. And each of those elements also have their own kind of children elements. And this kind of goes down as a tree further and further. And this is often how it's described, is as a tree, but I think that's a little confusing. Before I get there, that DOM tree, though, is then taken by your browser and turned into what you see. So like this very simple example website that has this title of example website and hello world gets translated into this in your browser. But I find this tree model just a little bit difficult to digest, so I kind of like to think about it as like a folder. similar to like a folder you might see on your computer. And so if we look at this idea, you can see here I have my HTML as folders folder, but we'll just start there. So very similar to what we saw in this slide is you have a doc type and an HTML at the same level. And then within the doc type you have the body and the head, and then the meta information, and then the title. It's kind of all there. So I kind of think of like it even as physical folders. Like as you open each parent, you look and say, oh, what children's are here, and that's how the browser's going to render the website. It's kind of like opening like those Russian dolls. It kind of goes all the way down. It's a helpful mental model for me. It might not work for you, but that's something I kind of think about when thinking about the hierarchy like this. Cool. All right. All right, browser development tools. When we were looking at DuckDuckGo, I opened up the Chrome development tools, and that's just one of the kind of options. I use Chrome, just what I'm comfortable with, but there's also Firefox, Safari, and Edge, and Opera. There are a host of other browsers, but I tend to develop with Chrome. That's just my preference. But most of these tools have all the very similar components. They have a page inspector, a network monitor, and those two things are kind of what we're going to be dealing with. A page inspector allows you to kind of graphically look at parts of the page to understand how it relates to the source, and the network monitor kind of shows the traffic going back and forth between your computer and the server that you're trying to use. There's also things like a web console, which shows you the JavaScript that's running, the JavaScript debugger, which is very similar to that. There are various performance tools, mobile design tools as well. Not all development tools have this tool set, but they all have something pretty darn similar. So let's take a look at a website. I am going to go to something a little bit more complex than DuckDuckGo, a website called dig.com. All right, so this is dig.com. It shows stuff. It's kind of like, it used to be a very popular website, and then it wasn't, and then it was bought. It doesn't really matter. The point is, it displays like pictures and stories about news. And so if we look at the network tab and hit refresh, we're able to see kind of what gets loaded. Right now, I only have the documents highlighted because I wouldn't want to show too much, just because it would be a bit loud and noisy. There's a lot going on. But if we only focus on the documents, we can see that we can see the actual web page getting sent back. And so at the top here, you see a doc type HTML, and what that signifies to the browser is, hey, the document that's coming back is in this format, and this format is HTML. There are some other kind of like caveats here. You know, if Internet Explorer 7, if Internet Explorer 8, like do some different things. And that's because back in the wild, wild west of the web, you would have situations where Internet Explorer would render things just a little bit differently than Mozilla or than, you know, another browser. So you had to, you now have to, you should explicitly kind of say what type of HTML you're rendering. And in this case, it's almost all the time going to be HTML. Going through, you'll start to see like the rest of the website. There's a lot here. There's a lot more than we're going to cover. So just don't worry about the verbosity. This is just kind of a way to kind of show that what you see on the left side on the web page you can dive into it using these dev tools. So here you see some of the meta information. You can go down and kind of look through it and see, okay, we have scripts for the JavaScript. We have some analytical things here. There's a lot going on. So it's a little bit difficult to dive in from the right side, but say, for example, say I wanted to check out a specific element. Using the page inspector, this is the little clicky, the pointer symbol, you can highlight various parts of your web page. And say, for example, I want to say, how is this long reads button rendered? Let's take a click. Cool. So it takes me right in the source to where it is, long reads. Well, maybe I don't want it long reads. Maybe I could call it short reads. And the browser re-renders. And the reason why I want to show you that is you're actually able to see what your browser is taking and rendering. If you ever have a question about something ask the browser, introspect, to see what's going on yourself, and you can kind of get halfway there most of the time. In addition to that, you can kind of examine some of the styles. So let's see. This is a style box, which basically allows you to add additional pieces. Say I wanted to change the text to the same color as this background here. So this is kind of like a pink salmon. I can grab that color, and then it'll give me the hex value, which is a way of representing a color. And I could say, all right, this element here, I'm going to change it to that color. So I will say color, and then boom. And now you can see, again, you change the website. So you can update the style and kind of structure of a website just by messing around with the dev tools, which is pretty cool. Something else I wanted to show you related to the network. So when I refresh this page, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see a method and a status. The method is what the browser is telling the server. It says, server@digg.com, get me digg.com. And the server gets that message and says, okay. That's actually literally what 200 stands for. It's like, okay, I'm going to do that, and it sends it back to you. There are about 50 or so HTTP statuses, and you don't have to learn them all. It's just kind of helpful to know what they are and how to find them. I'll have a link to this in my presentation, but you can kind of see here, okay, 200, okay, that makes sense. If something goes wrong, like say for example we try to go to digg.com and something we know doesn't exist, it's going to return back this, not bogus web page, but this thing saying like, hey, I don't know what you're looking for. And you said, all right, hey Digg, fetch me ADSFKJFDJ. It says, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to say not found. It's fairly simple. There's also, if you're not into the formal stuff, there's also HTTP status dogs. If you want to look to see like, maybe static text isn't your style, you want to see it in dog form, here it is. Just for fun. Cool. Let's see. One other thing, while we're talking about sources, there's a lot again here, but a way you can kind of look through things, you'll see up here it says Command P. If you want to search for like the index or any sort of file, you can kind of look through it here. Again, not something you'll want to do now or even this week, but just something to keep in the back of your head. That's kind of the reason why I wanted to expose everyone to this, is because it's not necessarily going to be something that you use today, right now, even this week. I find it helpful to kind of like accumulate these things in the background and remember, oh, this thing says that it was a 404. What does that mean? Or perhaps you'll see a status code you don't know, and you'll then be able to look that up. I want to help empower you all with the tools to kind of learn on your own, because really that's 80% of being a developer. Cool. Let's see. Awesome. Well, I think that's kind of the first part of my presentation. I'm going to take a look at the questions to see if anybody has any questions. So feel free to type them in, or just, let me know. Show me what you have. Cool. 20-second delay, works fine. 404 makes a lot of sense now. It does. And 404s are just kind of fun. Like, I think a lot of websites just have a good time with them on the internet. Let's see. You'll see a lot of them all over the place. Oh, no, this one is good. Well, regardless, sometimes you'll find websites which have a really, really fun version of their 404, and it's kind of cool. I think even Google's is actually pretty good. Let's take a look at that. I believe it's a robot. That's goofy. Yeah, there you go. 404, that's an error. Cool. Refresh is necessary. Yes, you can do a lot with dev tools. Cool. So no one else has any questions right now about anything I went over? I'll wait just 20 seconds just to make sure. Brandon, that's a great question. It's only going to affect your browser. So you're changing kind of what your browser is going to display. If you wanted to change what affects all of the websites that, all of the people who go to your website, you're going to have to change it on the server. Can you use something else than browser, like screen size, for example? Yes. Yes, you can use CSS as kind of a way in media queries to kind of understand what device is viewing your website. And that's kind of another way you'll be able to determine how to display your website. Something I didn't show, actually, that I meant to show. I'm glad that you brought that up. If you do want to see how your website will look on different mobile devices, bringing up DevTools again, there's a nice little device toolbar here, and you can kind of toggle between different types of devices, like either Android, and you can kind of pretend like you're on an Android device. So something kind of fun. Yeah, Tyler, your question is very similar to I's. Yeah, no, it's not a silly question. It totally makes sense. But yeah, what you see in your browser and kind of what you're editing in your browser is really only related to you. Cool. A quick drink of water. All right. Not seeing any more questions, so I am going to go to our live coding exercise. Again, feel free to throw questions in the YouTube Live comments, and yeah, let's kind of go from there. Let's build a website. There we go. I knew I had a slide for that. Cool. So, live coding website starts out just a little bit barren. And so, kind of the first thing you're going to want to type in here is going to be the doc type. And we're going to say doc type HTML. And again, the reason why we're doing this is so your computer knows like how to process this correctly. Rather, your browser knows how to process this correctly. You don't want it to think that it's looking at XML, like you want to specify HTML. Pretty simple. The next couple of like standard boilerplate things you're going to want to type in are HTML tags, and again, the head and the body. Cool. And so, one quick note, if you're wondering, I'm using a browser called Atom. Other people use Sublime as a text editor called Atom. Other people use Sublime. There are other text editors as well. Some people use terminal-based ones. This is just my personal preference. It's easy enough to use. Cool. So looking at what we have right here, it's just very basic. It's kind of like what every website has. In addition to this, we're going to want to type in the character set, UTF-8. And what that means is we want the browser to interpret the characters here as UTF-8 characters. I'll get to why that's important in a second. We're also going to type in a title here. And I'm going to call it My Planet Website. Cool. Let's see. In addition to that, we'll put something in the body, a header, and we'll say, this is my really cool planet website. And I'll add a little Earth in there. It's a fairly important planet. Cool. All right, so very simple. Something that's really cool about Atom, and I'm not sure if Sublime does this as well, but it has like shortcuts for completing tags. So if I type, for example, P and hit Command Option period, it'll finish it for me, and I only have to type, one thing. Something just to kind of keep in the back of your head. Okay, so we have a very simple website. Let's take a look at what it looks like. All right. So, okay. You're able to use Chrome as like a file explorer, similar to Finder on the Mac or Windows Explorer. I'm going to go into my live coding website and hit index.html, and it's going to show what we have here. Cool. So the reason why it went to, it didn't show anything initially is because I didn't point it to the right spot. You need to make sure you point it to an index.html or some sort of HTML file for it to load. Cool. You'll notice that there's a favicon here, like a little tiny icon. The reason that's there already is actually I'd practiced, full disclosure, I practiced for this, and I had already kind of found a favicon, but let's find another one because it's actually no longer, like I don't even have it in my file system anymore. So let's find another icon real quick. So planet icon. Real simple. Okay, so I saved that, and I'm now going to add it to my website. So I use a link tag with it kind of describe what the relation is. So shortcut icons are the favicon. And then you add an href, which is an HTML reference. I'm going to call it favicon.png just to keep it simple. And then it's going to be a type of image/x icon. And that just is, again, a way of like telling the browser how to render this. All right, so I'm going to refresh. Oops. And we'll notice like it hasn't changed. And so looking kind of at the console of the web inspector, I see actually I haven't saved it because I just downloaded it, right? I didn't actually put it where it's supposed to go. So if I go back to my live coding website and take what I just downloaded, maybe. Oh, did I not download it? You know, you have to download things for them to be on your computer. Cool. I'm saving that, and I'm going to add it to here. And I'm just going to call it favicon.png. Cool. So if I go back to my web page and I do a quick refresh, you can see that it's now updated, and now I have my cool favicon. I had mentioned that it's important to make sure that the character set is UTF-8, but I didn't explain why. I have a lot more details in kind of the end like links that I'm going to put out, but UTF, if telling a browser that HTML is the type of document, UTF is telling your browser what form the characters are in. So characters on a computer, you'd think that they're all like a standard. They're actually not. There are like a lot of different standards. And this is a result of kind of computers being built over the course of time, and you had all these different like ASCII standards, or standards for Europe, or standards for Japan or China. And so the kind of, now we're finally getting to a spot where we have a sort of standard, and it's UTF-8. But if we were to use a different standard like ASCII, you would see this rendered a little bit differently. The browser doesn't know when it tries to render the Earth as an ASCII character, you get a completely different thing. So that's why you want to make sure you're using the correct character set, in this case UTF-8. Cool. All right, I'm going to get to this stuff a little bit later. I just want to make sure everything is going generally okay. Is there anything here? Cool. I'll talk about that stuff in a little bit. Keep the questions up though. I'm really happy you guys are asking them. I'll have like a solid 10 minutes at the end to go over that. So keep asking the questions. They're great. Okay. So here we are. We have My Planet website. Very, very simple. Let's kind of add some more to it though. All right, so maybe I want to talk about, myself. I wrote it, right? So I'm going to add another tag here. I'm going to say about me. And I'm going to say my name is Jesse. This is my I'm a developer who likes space. Cool. And so I've added this, so now when I go back to my page, I'm going to refresh real quick and see, oh, cool, it has this here. Something to think about when you're developing is reducing the kind of action-reaction cycle. And what I mean by that is every time I type something, I want to refresh the page and see what happened. And the reason I want to do that is like you're more quickly able to understand what's happening and what effect your code is having if you're able to kind of see it real time. So I find that to be a very helpful debugging method, is to kind of type something in, save it, refresh, and kind of see how it changes. Super helpful. And kind of lowering that time is best. All right, so now we have an About Me section. Let's add a list of my favorite planets. And so there are a couple types of lists. There are ordered lists, which use the OL, which means it's going to be enumerated, so like 1, 2, 3, and there's unordered lists, which are like just bullet points, essentially. There we go, bullet points. So for ordered, I'm going to do an ordered list here because I'm going to talk about my favorite planets. Let's see, I'm going to add a paragraph that says, these are my favorite planets. And so then I will add, oh, actually I'm going to place this above this. This will make more sense up here. I'm not going to do it as that either. I'll do it again as a H3. And then in order to add a list, you're going to want to add various list tags. So first you add the ordered list tag. That's kind of like the top folder. And then you put list elements inside of it as like other children of the bigger folder. All right, so favorite planets are Earth, gotta represent. I think Saturn's beautiful. Saturn's a very pretty planet. Let's say I'm just going to start putting stuff down here. Mercury, Mars. I actually really like Mars. I'm getting way too editorial for this. Cool. All right, so I've added, these are my favorite planets, and it's a list. Cool. It kind of shows up, has this nice little order to it. What else might I want to add? So in doing this, I have this body, this folder, and now it has kind of a lot in it. It has like my title, it has my list of favorite planets, it has About Me section. It might make sense to me to kind of divide this up a little bit. And so there's a tag specifically for this. It's called the div tag. It's ubiquitous, it's used everywhere. It's a way of kind of just logically separating things while also providing spatial differences. And this might be a good time to actually bring up the difference between a block element and an inline element. And so let's see, how would I want to do this? If we were to put 2 paragraphs right here to say, this is paragraph 1, and then we'll just do another one. You can see that these two are separated. They're not on the same line. And this means that it's a block element. If, for example, I instead change this to 2 spans, and spans are kind of just like ways of wrapping text arbitrarily. They don't really mean anything, but they're kind of just a way to wrap text any way you want. If I were to put these 2 spans here, you'll see that they're both on the same line. And so inline elements result in being on the same line, whereas block elements will kind of stack. So it's kind of an important distinction. But what I was getting at with this sort of logical division, I'd also want to kind of divide this into its own block, its own div element, as a way to kind of make the code a little bit easier to read, but also just kind of logically divide it. And I might want to call this even, give it an identifier. I'm going to call this my favorite planets. And this identifier is my About Me section. Oops. And why I might want to do this is if in the future I wanted to add some sort of styling specific to my particular section, I can do so. What's also cool is I can link to specific IDs within my web page. So if I wanted to, for example, navigate down to the About Me, I could do so by referencing this ID. So let's take a look at what that means. So if I were to add an A tag, which is an anchor tag, to say jump to About Me, I could then add an href, again an HTML reference, to the About Me section. Cool. Now let's take a look at this. Here it is. You can't really see it jump, but you'll notice that the URL changed to signify that it's jumping down there. So to make this kind of a little more apparent, I'm just going to make this a hello long list, all the earth. So now when I hit the jump to About Me, it actually jumps down. That's kind of a useful way of navigating a website. Not necessarily something you'd always do, but it's kind of a nice little way to enable people to jump to particular sections from your website, so you can have a long website but still be able to navigate quickly. A second piece I guess I'd want to bring up here is there are certain characters which are part of the HTML language which might not seem obvious. Two of those you'll see everywhere, the greater than and less than symbol. The other is spaces. And so the way HTML is parsed, it doesn't actually care what spaces you have between your words or how many it has. It just assumes each of these words is a single token. It's going to put one space between them. So here, for example, I just push planets all the way over. So what might you expect this to do? You might expect this to be pushed all the way over, but it wasn't. And the reason is it doesn't, like HTML parsing doesn't care. It only cares if it only gives you one space between words. You can change that though by using a special character. And most of the special characters look like this. It's called a non-blocking space character. And so if I go back here, you'll see a little space. Sorry, I'll do this a little more obviously. I'll add a couple. You can see that the planets has moved over to the right. And the reason why you can't, why HTML is rendered this way is it would be very difficult to kind of understand the difference between words. It would add a lot of overhead to have to count all these spaces. It's just kind of a simplification technique. Another example would be if I wanted to put a less than sign here. You'll notice my syntax changed a little bit here, and the reason why that is like it's a little confused. My text editor is confused about what the heck I'm trying to do. You'll see like things got bolded. It's not really clear what's going on. I think what ends up happening is the H3 tag gets extended further down. Let's say I legitimately wanted a less than sign. I could go in instead and do less than with a semicolon afterwards, and you'll have that inserted in. So not something you use all the time, but it is useful to know that there are a couple of these characters which are very, very unique, and you can't use them in the way you'd use normal characters. Okay. I'm going to take a quick look, make sure everything is good. That's too many words. Cool. I will get to, well, yeah, I will get to all those. So good. Good questions. Let's see. So there's also this idea of, well, let's say I wanted to add another website. Say I didn't want my favorite planets to be on the same website as my homepage. I could add an external reference to that. So instead of saying jump to About Me, I could say jump to a file that's relative called favorite planets. And so Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Cool. So now I have jump to favorite planets, and I hit click, and it says my file was not found. That makes plenty of sense because it doesn't exist yet. I haven't made it. I also only called it favorite planets. I'm going to have to name it HTML because that's what I'm going to want it to be. So I grab, if I grab the text that I took for the favorite planets and add a new favorite planets.html. I'm pretty sure I spelled this wrong, but I'm going to have to add the same kind of stuff that I had before here, like the doc type, the header. We're going to want a body again here. These again, it's just boilerplate. Like, it's annoying, but like once you get used to it, it's pretty simple to kind of throw it in wherever you need to. But it's something you have to do for each website you write. So again, just kind of adding all of the basics here. We'll keep the same favicon, but what we are going to change the title. This is my planet list. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll call it. This actually might make more sense. My planet website planet list. Cool. It'll have the same icon. So now let's go back and take a look. So now you can see it's disappeared. If I click here, it still isn't found. I'm guessing this is because I spelled something wrong. Oh, so it looks like I'm referencing an underscore instead of a hyphen, and so I'm going to modify that to the correct name. Cool. So now my favorite planets are here, and I have this navigation, kind of all as well. So that's a way you can link between websites. And so there's this idea of the semantic web. And what that means is when I use something like a div, it's not entirely clear what I'm dividing. Like, it's not really, I'm not really expressively saying what this section of the website is just by using the div tag. I am using the about me, but I'm not doing so using like a tag. There are a lot of tags that kind of are expressive. So one of which is the nav tag. And so I can wrap this in a nav tag, and then like it doesn't really change anything, but it kind of designates when you're reading, oh, this is navigation. And so you hear this sort of topic referred to as the semantic web. And I think the intention of it is really great to kind of make sure what you're writing is very descriptive, because the code you write when you're working in a software development shop is it's going to be read a lot more than it's written. And so when I'm writing code, like I want people to be able to read it. That's my goal. It's not so that's like the shortest or the pithiest or like the most clever. It's that when people need to understand what's happening, they get it. And also performance and things like that. Those are also very important. But a key part of writing code later on too, like when you're just getting started, don't think too much about this, but kind of something, again, to keep in the back of your head is you want to make sure that when you look at a piece of code, you understand what it's doing. And so that's why some people argue that like using something like div is a little bit confusing, because like, well, what is it dividing? In my real world experience, I really haven't had a lot of exposure to using these semantic things like nav. Other examples are like main. Main is another example. Like I could have a main section here where I just say, you know, this is the main part of my website. And I might want to, you know, put this in a h3 tag just so it exists. But there are some like kind of useful ones which you can make specific to your own. You can use block quotes, for example. Block quotes is another kind of semantic-y thing, and I could say like, this is the best website ever, and then, you know, Abe Lincoln. You know, whether this was actually said is unknown, but you can kind of see it does a little bit of formatting. It kind of moves it inward and kind of sets it up so that like it looks like a website, which is pretty cool. Or rather, so it looks like a quote, not like a website. All right. One other thing I want to show, like one thing you never want to do when creating a website is so you can jump to the favorite planets. Now the only way I can get back is hitting back. That's kind of a big no-no. You don't want that to be the case. You want to be able to find some place on this website where you can click and get back to where you came from. It just kind of leave some breadcrumbs for people. So here I'm going to stick in a another A reference here, so that and so we can jump here to the index.html, and then jump back to the home page. Cool. So very simple, just allows you to kind of navigate between where you want to. I said that there are blocking and inline, or block and inline elements. And here we ran into an issue where these are kind of both in a line. If we didn't want that and we didn't want to use a specific block element, we can use something called a break tag. And that'll break things between, that'll kind of automatically insert not a block, but automatically put something on the next line. You can put a bunch of these next to each other and it'll push it down. Not necessarily something I want to do, and not something you use very often, but it's like one of those things that's good to have in your tool set. That's really nice. Cool. Oh, we're talking about space and we don't even have any sweet space images. That won't do. All right, let's get a good picture of Pluto here. Yikes. So that's a really big picture. That might be a little bit tough. So something cool you can do with Google here is you should be able to, I don't want to do that. I thought I could look for, there we go, cool. Tools, size, make just a little bit, like a medium size. We don't want to go nuts, we just want to picture of Pluto. We don't want to blow everything away. Cool, so I can grab this and within my main section I might want to put an image. And an image is a an image is a tag that doesn't have a closing element. Like most elements will have an opening without a forward slash and then a closing tag. For images, you just have to put the forward slash, and it's just kind of like a single line element. So now when we go back to my Planet website, cool, we have this huge picture of Pluto next to our picture of Abe Lincoln. We'd still jump to About Me. Everything still works well. Also kind of fun is you can add styling in line. So if I wanted to add style here, I could say I actually don't want it to be quite so big, and I could say 200 pixels by height of 200 pixels. That might stretch it a bit, but whoops. Well, I didn't keep the resolution the same, but you can kind of see how you can shrink and make it a little bit different. You can resize it in line. That's a little better. So that's kind of a way you can add images. Let's see. So similar to navigating to About Me pages, you could also navigate to another website altogether. So instead, if I want to go to www.nasa.gov, nasa.gov, you can add a link just like that. Go to a real space website. Oh no. Oh. I didn't mean to do that. What have I done? Shoot. So this brings up another point. So the best thing about the web is that everything's available. So I'm just showing you, this is what I would do in real life. Like, I should know this 100%. I'm sorry I don't. But you can very easily kind of just add can look up just about anything. My preferred site is always MDN, or Mozilla Development Network. And so I'm just going to check out one of these links right here and see how it's formatted. Oh, so it's going to the same thing. So what's different there? Did I really do that wrong? It's appending it on. Oh. There we go. So I didn't specify that you actually need to go to using the HTTP protocol. My bad. Sorry, everyone. But what my illustrating point there is that when you run into a problem specifically related to HTML and CSS, like some of your best help is going to be found on the internet and looking at the Mozilla Development Network and just like Stack Overflow. There's also sites called like W3 org. I find W3 to be a little less accurate and a little less robust, but Mozilla puts out great stuff. So I would hop to them if you ever run into issues. Well, cool. I promised you I would take a look at some questions. I think we have the start of a website here, a really cool Planet website. So let's see what questions we've accrued. All right. So when should you use the source section of the DevTools? Whenever you want to look at, this is for EL, this is whenever you kind of want to see what's going on with a website. So say I want to see what's going on with this website, I would just do the same thing. I can kind of look at the source or look at the elements to kind of see just what's happening. It's whenever you want to introspect and kind of go into a website. Do I not use the tab shortcut? That's a good question. I think I do. Sometimes I do. It just really depends. Like if I'm typing in, yeah, I think I do. I do use it. How did I bring up character sets, Brandon? I think Atom just has some autocomplete functionality brought in for HTML. Brian, how do you close tags with Windows? I think it depends on what browser you're using. If Atom's available, I'd imagine it's something probably like Windows Alt period, but you'd have to kind of look at Atom's documentation. And that's also something I would say, like, don't be afraid to look into, like, web companies are really, really good about kind of showing you how to do things. And so look at the docs. A lot of them are kind of accessible and easy for beginners. Like, they want people to learn. And so don't be afraid to take a look. Cool. Move the refresh part. Awesome. Oh, to Tyler's point, this is taken years. I use something called Vim, Vim bindings. It's a text editor in the terminal. It's really kind of old school. So if I were to look at like a file here, it kind of has its own way of like navigation. It's just a little bit quicker, and so it took me like a solid 6 or 8 months to get used to it. And it was very like back and forth process. I was not like quick with shortcuts coming out the bat, especially when I was first coding. What's the difference between ID and class? They're both ways of identifying parts of an HTML document. IDs are used to identify like one specific document. They should only appear once. And something to think about generally with the way HTML is loaded, it's kind of loaded top to bottom. And so if you have 2 IDs labeled, it will go to the second one if you have it as the same label, if that makes sense. So if I were to have labeled, instead of an about me, and then about me again, part 2, and then add breaks all the way down. Now I go back to my Planet website that I had. Cool, I did. So if I jump to about me, it actually jumps to the second one. Oh, shoot. Never mind. It only jumps to the first one. Is that right? Yeah, it jumps to the first one. So I guess that's what I was trying to say. With IDs, it'll grab the first one, and then the second one will be ignored. So something to be cognizant of. If you're using classes, on the other hand, it's kind of grouping a whole bunch of elements. So you might name all of your images like that you want to be medium-sized, medium images. Whereas IDs, you just want to use once. How do you add the Earth icon from Atom? On a Mac, you can just hit Command Control Space, and that'll bring up a character map, essentially. You can just add them. What's nice is that Atom actually understands them. It's kind of different on all the different versions, all the different operating systems. Is it possible to control where it jumps instead of the top of the window? I'm not sure exactly what that means. You can choose kind of where it jumps with the ID, and you can kind of set an anchor or an ID at the top to understand where it will go back to, but I'm not sure exactly what that means, so if you want to clarify. Brandon, what the characters are, like, do you mean how I create Unicode characters? If so, like I said, I just kind of bring them up. The shortcuts, sure, I can actually post something real quick. But I would really encourage everyone not to like get bogged down in being quick at coding right now. It's more important just to understand like how to, I don't know if this is still a thing. This is how I learned my shortcuts, everybody. True story. That's how I learned. But I would really advise on just like I would not do that now. I would take some time, just learn the HTML, learn the basics, pick up shortcuts as you go. If you like one, use it. If you don't worry about being quick right now. There is some inline styling for maintaining image ratio. I just don't know it right now. We'll go over that next week more with CSS. And percentage, I think, is probably it. You're right. Cool. Ashley, sorry you had to restart. Auto-completing closing tags. Up flippity. Option Command period works in tab. Looks like I has some good stuff related to Windows. Do you typically use the Alt attribute with your Windows? I do. David, I tend to do so. At work, we end up using a lot of GIFs to describe our pull requests, and I've used that as a way to get into the habit of doing so. It is really important because, like, people who can see, we kind of take it as like for granted that we're able to, look at the web and kind of like see what's going on. But there's a large subset of people who can't, and so thank you, David, for bringing that up. It's really important to also put like an alternate text in the image piece so that when you hover over it, it will show something for screen readers. And so if I were to say, this is Pluto, and go back to my Planet website, what you'll see is, again, I'm just going to have to do this, alt text. It should display. Sorry, I just don't want to waste too much, not waste time, but this is what we were talking about. Like, it'll show this additional text here, and that's how screen readers read it. Sorry, I couldn't come up with the alt text quick enough, but that's what's done. Cool. Awesome. Hopefully I got to everyone's questions, and hopefully this was useful. I'm actually not sure what sort of feedback you guys are able to give, but feel free to give any sort of feedback. I want to make these as useful to you as possible. Kind of my goal is to make sure you understand, kind of like go over concepts that you learned during the week and kind of make sure you understood them, and then kind of as a second point, try to kind of teach you some things that they might not have gotten to. And so this is really enjoyable. I'm really happy I was able to do this and kind of interact with everyone. Have a great afternoon, and I'll see you next week. Hope everything went well. Take care.